Right now, from KTAB News, your local election headquarters, this is Big Country Politics.
Welcome to Big Country Politics. I'm Victor Sotelo. We start with news from Washington. President Trump has been impeached again. The vote was 232 to 197, with 10 Republicans voting with Democrats. They say he bears the responsibility for deadly attacks on the U.S. Capitol. Here's more from the Capitol, including a message from the president.
The House of Representatives impeached President Trump on Wednesday for inciting an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol.
The terrorists who stormed this building plan to hang the vice president, kill the speaker, and topple our government.
Mr. Trump becomes the only president to be impeached twice.
Well, we said if we didn't remove him, he would do it again.
While National Guard troops camped out in the Capitol, 222 Democrats were joined by 10 Republicans in voting yes, making it the most bipartisan impeachment vote in U.S. history.
I am not choosing a side, I'm choosing truth. It's the only way to defeat fear.
Most of the GOP argued for unity in the president's defense, even if some admitted he bears responsibility.
A vote to impeach will further fan the flames of partisan division.
But Democrats want Mr. Trump held accountable.
People died because of the big lies that were being told.
After weeks of false election claims,
it was a rigged election,
culminating in last week's fiery speech.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
While the trial isn't expected to start until after President Trump leaves office, a conviction by 2/3 majority of the Senate would likely bar him from running for president again.
My fellow Americans,
President Trump did not mention the impeachment in a video released by the White House, but he did tell his supporters there should be no more violence.
No true supporter of mine could ever endorse political violence.
In a statement, President-elect Joe Biden says he hopes the Senate can balance the trial with working on the nation's business. Deborah Alfarone, CBS News, Washington.
And Biden takes office on the 20th. The earliest the Senate will come back is on the 19th, and they also have to hold hearings and confirmation votes for Biden's cabinet and other political appointees. And Snap Inc. is permanently terminating U.S. President Donald Trump's Snapchat account, according to company spokesman last week, who said in a statement last week, Snap had announced an indefinite suspension of the account following the Capitol's violent unrest and said it had decided to permanently ban the account in the interest of public safety and based on his attempts to spread misinformation, hate speech, and incite violence. Snap joined several media companies that have taken action against the president and some of his supporters to encourage and engage in violence on YouTube and Facebook, and remove Trump's account and eliminate content supporting last week's assault. And the commander of Dice Air Force Base met with members of an Abilene service group Wednesday. Colonel Jose Sumingel was the speaker at the Kiwanis Club of Abilene meeting last week. Colonel Sumingel addressing rumors that Trump was in Abilene last week. He told the group that the big blue and white plane with the United States of America painted on the side of it was not Air Force One. We confirmed that for you last week. The colonel says the plane was a National Airborne Operations Center plane. It looks like the plane that the president travels on. We also asked the colonel about COVID-19 at the base. He says numbers are relatively low and that the airmen continue to follow the guidelines to reduce the spread of the virus. And KTAB is your local election headquarters, and there will be more elections in a few months. Last Wednesday was the first day for candidates to file the Abilene municipal election. Abilene businessman and former police lieutenant Lynn Beard signed paperwork to become a candidate for place 2 on the council. Beard says he wants to focus on public safety, employment, to recovering from COVID, planning and zoning, and the city's relationship with Dice infrastructure and improving the quality of life in Abilene. And there will be at least one more candidate for that position on the city council. 24-year-old Abilene native Garrett Hubbard also filed for election. Incumbent place 2 Councilman Jack Rentz announced that he does not plan to run again for re-election. And City Councilman Shane Price says he is planning to run again for place 1. Price has served for 12 years on the Abilene City Council. He says he wants to continue being a voice for the citizens in Abilene. Filing for the election continues through Friday, February 12th. Municipal elections across Texas are scheduled for Saturday, May 1st. All right, still to come on Big Country Politics, we talk with Dr. Paul Fabrizio of McMurray University about last week's events. We're back in 2 minutes.
Big Country Politics on KTAB continues.
All right, welcome back to Big Country Politics, and joining us again is Dr. Paul Fabrizio, political science professor over at McMurray University, our local expert when it comes to everything politics. And
thank you.
We have a lot to talk about.
We do. What an exciting time to be alive.
I mean, it's really historic. Last week, the president was impeached for a second time.
Yeah, who would have thought? You know, we were here last week. The word impeachment really wasn't bandied about or anything.
Come up, yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's now completed. And the next question is there going to be a trial? Well, there will be a trial, but when is that trial going to be? And what will be the consequence of that?
Well, and you brought up last week, and we were talking, well, I guess it was just a general conversation because some things happened before that. And for the life of me, I can't even remember what, because between that time and now, so much has happened, and everything is changing so fast. Things are just rolling right along.
We had this unprecedented event, this riot in the Capitol building, this insurrection, if you will, to deliberately stop the process of transfer of power. And so there's consequences that flow from that. And one of the consequences now is that President Trump is the first president to be impeached twice.
Let's talk about that process. Let's let people know what this process is, because I remember when I first became familiar with it, like a lot of people, was when President Clinton was impeached, was not convicted, and I thought, okay, so there's a process. Being impeached is not the final thing. You have to be convicted. And there's a whole trial to that, or a hearing to that.
Right. So you have to look at impeachment as like a grand jury. And so the grand jury said, in this case, the House of Representatives, said there's enough evidence here that the president should be tossed out. But it's not our decision. They send it over to the Senate. And the Senate, they have a trial, a real trial. There'll be prosecutors. The House has appointed 9 members of Congress to serve as prosecutors. The president will be entitled to a defense. And it'll take place, we believe, after he is no longer president, but it'll still take place. The consequence of that would be the president is convicted. That would take 2/3 of the Senate, so 67 senators. And then afterwards, and this is probably the most important part, if he's convicted, then the Senate can take a vote, simple majority rules, to say the president cannot run for president again.
Which is the reason, I guess, they're going through with this process, because a lot of people are asking themselves, or asking out loud, you know, he's going to be out of office anyway. Why go through this process? There's the answer.
Right. It's about changing the Republican Party in the future. There is evidence that Mitch McConnell, the majority leader of the Senate, the leader of the Republicans, wants to get Donald Trump out of the picture for the Republican Party. And so to do that, you make sure he's not a candidate in 2024.
Well, and 10 Republicans actually broke ranks and voted for impeachment.
Yes, yes. So when impeachment took place on Wednesday, these 10, including the number 3 person, Liz Cheney, the daughter of Vice President Dick Cheney, voted to impeach the president, and others. I think about Chip Rohr, the congressman from East Texas. He said he thinks the president did wrong. He would support impeachment if it was a different article of impeachment than what was brought forward. And so there is real breaking with the president, not a great number, but there is a breaking with the president on the part of some Republicans.
And then while it was being announced that yes, they are definitely going to impeach the president takes to Twitter and
Not Twitter. He can't use Twitter.
Well, he used the White House account.
Okay, yeah.
He used the White House account on Twitter and really gave the speech that he should have given
a week ago.
And it seems like, and this is just my opinion, it seems like he got a good talking to and said, hey, you got to go on TV and do this.
Right.
Because you're about to be impeached, and this could, to me, it sounded like, okay, I'm going to give this speech, and it'll look good for me in my trial, in my impeachment trial.
Right. And what he has to realize, and there's evidence that he is that he has to work on the senators in the Senate. House is done. He's got to go after the senators, and he doesn't need to convince many, but he needs to convince enough Republican senators that they should leave him alone. They should acquit him. Yeah, he's done wrong. Yes, there was violence, but that's it. You don't need to punish me any farther. What the strategy is behind the president and how he goes about doing that, who his lawyers are going to be in this trial, has not been worked out yet. The president still has a lot of steps to go.
So I want to ask you this because I've been wondering. So some congressmen, let's take Jody Arrington, did not support impeachment.
No.
Did not support the Electoral College.
Right. He objected.
Objected right before the U.S. Capitol was taken over or invaded.
Right.
And then releases a statement yesterday, or releases video yesterday of him on the floor talking about why he does not support impeachment. How does this affect congressmen like Jody Arrington? I mean, I guess they're walking a fine line. I guess. Maybe not here in Abilene. But
See, what is the job of a congressman? Their job in the end is to represent us. So Congressman Arrington and many other Republicans took the position that their voters are Trump supporters, so they're going to support Donald Trump too. And so that's one way to interpret the job. They're representing their voters. There's another sense, though, that as representatives, you don't do everything that the voters tell you to do. You follow the Constitution. You follow the evidence. And so that is a criticism, and I'd be one of those who would make that with Jody Arrington, especially in regards to the Electoral College, that he did what his voters wanted rather than what he should have done in terms of the Constitution. And so, that's the line that a member of Congress has to walk. Do you represent your voters, even if they want something that you disagree with, or do you follow the words of the Constitution? Some members of Congress, Republicans, and again I think of Chip Roy, they chose a different path, even though they're from pro-Trump areas. They chose a different path than Jody Arrington. So, what's the correct way to do it?
And I guess we'll find out a lot more once the election comes around for them in the next 2 years and see how it goes. I mean, surely people are going to remember what went on.
We have no idea.
We have no idea. We got to run to commercial,
yes. But
when we come back, I want to look ahead at the inauguration.
Okay.
All right, we'll be back on Big Country Politics.
Big Country Politics on KTAB continues.
All right, welcome back to Big Country Politics. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. Paul Fabrizio, political science professor over at McMurray University. We've talked about the impeachment, only president to be impeached twice now. Other two presidents, by the way, Clinton and
Andrew
Johnson. Just to put that out there in case you were wondering. Now I want to look ahead to the inauguration. They're already preparing. Their National Guardsmen sleeping at the Capitol. As a matter of fact, capitals around the country are preparing because apparently there are plans, even though President Trump went on Twitter last week as they were announcing his impeachment and, like we said during the last segment, made the speech that he probably should have made a week before that. Have you ever been... Is this this is unprecedented, really, right? I mean, this is going to be a nerve-wracking inauguration when it should be a celebration, I guess.
Right. And what we have to do, put it in a historic context first, you have to go back to the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln in 1861 to find a similar kind of atmosphere where there were troops in the Capitol building, where the president was concerned, or the president-elect was concerned about his safety, in the case of Joe Biden, that he will no longer take an Amtrak train from Delaware to Washington, D.C. It recalls Abraham Lincoln, who had to sneak into Washington, D.C. before his inauguration. We're in incredibly, intensely tough times. The pandemic, for one, and then all the political tensions, for two. So we're going to have a very muted celebration of this new president. There won't be crowds of people. We won't hear about the largest crowd in inaugural history. It just won't happen. There'll be hundreds of invited people there, but that's about it. And there won't be the ceremonial parade that presidents have typically walked before. There won't be the inaugural balls before. Instead, there's going to be an event that's going to be shown on many TV stations. So it's going to be a virtual celebration that evening. So it's going to be a whole different kind of event. But we're in a different time. So Biden is responding to that time.
As we are approaching Inauguration Day, we said the Wednesday, right?
Next Wednesday, the 20th.
Next Wednesday, Inauguration Day. And they're going to be looking out for more plans to, like we said, other capitals are getting ready for this.
Right.
I don't even know what the question is. Is there and you've already put it into historical terms here, but has there been any other, I guess besides the Civil War, where there has been a threat from within?
Yeah. We've had tense inaugural events, if you look at American history. Okay? So that we've had political pressures, we've had political tensions, but to compare this to anything else, you only can go back to the Civil War. I mean, that's a horrible thing to say.
I was hoping, I brought that up in hopes you wouldn't say that.
But there isn't anything else. The election of 1876, which went to an electoral commission, that was very, very intense. But they didn't have the pressure that Joe Biden is entering now. The pandemic really changes the whole atmosphere of things. It probably increases the pressure that's coming from the partisanship that's taking place.
And I guess the partisanship is maybe it's growing, but a lot of it stems from the election.
Yes.
And a lot of people feel that the election was unfair, votes were stolen, and there is some evidence, as in every election, that has happened. I mean, Ken Paxton released a news release last week saying that they have arrested somebody for voting fraud.
But we need to be careful.
Okay.
The fraud that has taken place in this election involves 1 or 2 votes in various places. It is nowhere close to what was alleged. It has no effect on the overall vote total. Joe Biden won this election in a very, very fair way.
And that's where I was going with this question. Where is all this coming from? Where is all this momentum coming from? And is it coming from the president, and a lot to do with that speech that he gave on the day that the U.S. Capitol was stormed?
I would argue that if you look at President Trump's history, he claimed the election in 2016 was rigged. And remember, there was a big thing before that election. Will you accept the results of the election, Mr. Trump? Mm-hmm. So,
and it was never a straight answer, by the way.
It was never a straight answer. So what we've got is a theme for the last 4 years.
You're saying it's probably a buildup then?
It is a buildup, and then it exploded. And it exploded in a violent way on January 6th.
We're going to be seeing these proceedings, these impeachment proceedings on TV. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Yes.
And I'm sure the nation will be glued At least some people will be glued to the TV. You will.
Yes.
What do you expect? What do you expect in this? What do you expect as far as historical perspective? I'm going to ask you to take a leap forward and
we haven't seen the words that Joe Biden is going to use. My sense is because of the issues, he is going to project a determined look. This is what we will do. We will take immediate action regarding the pandemic. We will reach out to Republicans to try to get them so that we can all work together on things. I think he will take that route rather than go back 4 years ago to President Trump's inaugural address where he said, I alone can fix these problems, and he talked about American carnage. That was one approach that he took, and I think it summed up his presidency. What we're going to hear from Biden is a whole different kind of thing. And my guess is he won't even mention Donald Trump in his inaugural address.
Well, you're talking like this is a tipping point, like this is the fulcrum moving back the other direction. I mean, we were really right as far as the country goes. And with President Trump, we were really to the right.
Yes.
And it sounds like because of the last 4 years, we're swinging the other direction.
Yes, and we elect.
And it happens.
It happens. Yeah, the pendulum always swings.
30 seconds.
With 30 seconds. The pendulum always swings. That's the way it goes. And Joe Biden is a Democrat. The pendulum is going to be swinging left. Joe Biden, however, for the most part, is a moderate. He is going to try to stop the pendulum from swinging too far left because he knows he wants some support from the right.
Because the consequences are we go the other direction again.
Yeah, we go the other direction. And also another consequence could be more violence, and he does not want that either.
All right. Dr. Paul Fabrizio, McMurray University, political science professor, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be back on Big Country Politics. All right, and that does it for this week's edition of Big Country Politics. And we thank, again, Dr. Fabrizio for being here. And remember, for the latest political headlines, always go to bigcountryhomepage.com, and we'll see you same time next week, same place. Thanks for watching.